You notice it in stupid little moments before you admit it has a shape. They talk about Friday drinks while standing beside your desk. Then the conversation folds. When you look up, a new hire arrives in March. And by April knows the weekend group chat, the inside jokes, the lunch rhythm while you have been there 4 years, asking polite questions about weekends like a person tapping on glass. Someone says, "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to come." And your face performs maturity while your nervous system hears something colder. Wanting the pattern named does not mean you're desperate for coworkers to become family. It means you noticed social information being withheld and your body noticed before your pride allowed it. Here's the uncomfortable rule underneath that feeling. When exclusion is only personal, it bruises you and maybe ruins lunch. When exclusion becomes coordinated, it starts altering what your brain believes is safe. Inside the workplace, you stop walking into the room as an adult with a role and start entering like an animal checking the air for threat. Your shoulders tighten before the meeting opens. The inbox ping gives you a small electric jolt. You reread harmless messages because a social organism has started teaching your nervous system that normal contact may carry rejection. The detox begins by naming what happened without shrinking it. The earliest clue is the one people dismiss because it sounds childish when you say it out loud. New people are absorbed quickly while you remain peripheral. They receive invitations you never received, nicknames you never earned, and casual warmth that never seemed available when you were the new one trying to find a place to stand. You tell yourself they are more outgoing, more fun, more available after hours, and sometimes that is true. But when the pattern repeats across several new arrivals, your exclusion is no longer about your introversion. Someone has decided the group can grow, just not around you. Another clue is the sudden temperature drop. You enter the break room, and the voices soften without anyone being rude enough to create a clean incident. A joke gets clipped in half. Phones turn face down. Somebody suddenly remembers a task. In remote teams, the same thing happens through silence. The thread that was lively until you post it. The emoji reactions that appear for everyone else and vanish around your message like birds avoiding a window. You will be tempted to shame yourself for noticing, and you do not need to. The social brain evolved to detect belonging cues because exile used to be dangerous, and the body still reads it that way. Detox means you stop negotiating with the part of you that wants to apologize for having normal needs. You needed information. You needed inclusion on work, relevant conversations. You needed to know whether lunch was just lunch or where the team decided, who was approachable, who was difficult, and who deserved patience. Instead, you learned to make yourself smaller. You laughed softly. You asked twice, and then never again. You pretended the birthday cake you found in the kitchen after everyone ate it was funny, because admitting it hurt would have handed them another soft place to press. Another place, it appears, is the invitation that exists everywhere except in your direction. They discuss the party openly, compare rides, mention who brought what last time, and then act surprised when you know enough to know you were left out. The excuse often arrives wearing politeness. You seemed busy. We thought you were private. We figured you had other plans. After 4 years, that explanation starts to rot. If they can remember to invite someone who started 3 months ago, they can remember you exist. Forgetfulness that selectively finds the same person every time usually means permission wearing a nicer shirt. The pattern sharpens when exclusion quietly begins carrying information. You are left off the email list for the office announcement. You find out a director left a month late. The meeting moved because someone mentioned it in the chat you are not in. The group lunch became the place where a project risk was casually aired, and by the next morning, everyone else has context you do not have. That is the hinge point. Social coldness is painful, but information coldness changes your position. Your brain senses the shift and starts scanning constantly, because being uninformed at work can get disguised later as being disengaged. This is why the confident advice, "just ignore them," only works for people whose exclusion has no consequences attached. If your boss still includes you, your assignments stay clean, and your performance is visible, solitude may feel peaceful. Several people genuinely prefer the quiet, And good for them. May their lunch hour remain blessedly free of pet stories and microwaved fish diplomacy. But if the exclusion touches access, your nervous system cannot simply decide to be above it. It is trying to protect your future with the primitive tools it has: muscle tension, rumination, appetite changes, and the charming urge to refresh slack like a lab animal. Then you start noticing the gatekeeper everyone pretends is just social. One person dislikes you, competes with you, or simply decided early that you were not their kind of person. And somehow, every new relationship passes through their mood. A new colleague is warm for 2 weeks. Then, after lunch with the gatekeeper, they become careful. They still smile, but the warmth has been drained and replaced with safe office weather. You cannot prove the whisper happened. Usually, you will never hear it. You only see the behavioral change, which is often enough. Groups rarely exile someone without a center of gravity. Watch closely for the look people exchange before answering you directly. You ask lightly if there is a group going out after work, and someone glances sideways before saying maybe. You suggest coffee, and they answer as if accepting would require clearance from a parent. You mention joining the charity walk, the trivia night, the Friday drink, and the air gets patted. That tiny pause matters because it shows the decision is not happening inside the person you asked. They are checking the invisible social field around them, trying to sense whether including you would contaminate their own belonging. Now the rewiring begins, and it begins with a sentence you practice before you believe it. I can want inclusion without begging for adoption. Your brain may have learned a survival pattern that says, more effort will thaw the group. Ask more questions. Laugh harder. Bring food. Stay later. Become easier. Become warmer. Become whatever texture they seem to reward. That instinct is understandable. And it is also the part they can feed on. The more you chase, the more their refusal becomes a source of status. You become the person auditioning for people who already enjoy being the tastemakers. A cognitive behavioral shift starts smaller than your ego wants. You separate evidence from interpretation without erasing either. Evidence: you were not invited. Newer coworkers were. Plans were discussed in front of you. Messages bypassed you. People look uncomfortable when you ask directly. Interpretation: everyone hates me. I am defective. I have failed socially. There must be something humiliating about me. The first category belongs in your evidence files. The second category belongs in treatment, not because you are broken, but because repeated exclusion can teach the brain to turn every social gap into an identity wound. Eventually, even the last-minute invitation starts feeling less like welcome than actual cleanup. Someone realizes you can see the photos, or that a manager might ask why you were absent, so the invite arrives with no real room for you to participate. We're already there if you want to swing by. We only have one seat left. You can come, but it might be a little boring. Then at the event, nobody anchors you into conversation. You stand there holding a drink, physically present and socially outside, which is a special kind of little office pneumonia. The most serious clue arrives when the exclusion quietly starts shaping how your actual work is judged later. Suddenly, you are missing context, then being evaluated as if context was available. You did not know the client preference because it was discussed over lunch. You did not hear that the deadline softened because it was in the side chat. You were absent from the informal conversation where the team agreed on the real priority. Then your manager says you seem out of sync. The phrase "out of sync" sounds personal, although it may be environmental. Pay attention to whether your manager participates, observes, or corrects it. A healthy manager does not need to force friendship, because forced friendship is just resentment with name tags. But they do need to protect access. If announcements, process changes, staffing updates, training invitations, and decision conversations are drifting around you instead of through the same channels everyone else uses, that is a leadership issue. Your boss may not care that nobody wants pizza with you, and honestly, the pizza may not deserve you, but your boss should care if social exclusion is turning into professional fog. The boundary has nothing to do with demanding affection. It protects access to the conditions required to do your job without guessing. You do not walk into a one-on-one and say, Why doesn't everyone like me? Unless you want the conversation to melt into reassurance oatmeal. You say, I am noticing that work-relevant information is being shared outside the channels I can see, and it is creating gaps in execution. Can we move project decisions back into the team thread or meeting notes so everyone is operating from the same information? The language is calm, specific, and boring enough to survive. If you want to test whether it is a misunderstanding, ask once, cleanly, through the safest person in the group. Not the most powerful socially, the most humane. I heard people sometimes get together after work. If it is open, I'd be glad to join sometime. Then you let the experiment end there, because the ending is the medicine. Reality gets one chance to correct itself without taking your dignity with it. If they include you after that and treat you decently, fine. If they dodge, forget, or invite you into another cold room, you have your answer. Rewiring also means unlearning the apology reflex. Excluded people often become strangely overpolite. Sorry to bother you. Sorry if this is obvious. Sorry. Could I ask one more thing? Sorry for needing the document that everyone else received without groveling. Each apology teaches your brain that your basic presence requires permission. Replace it with neutral language. Can you send me the notes from that discussion? Please add me to the distribution list for team updates. I'll need the same context the group is using before I can finish this accurately. The point is to re-educate your nervous system, not inflame the room. Keep evidence files, but do not worship them. Dates, missing invites, information gaps, changed behavior after specific conversations, examples where you were held responsible for context you never received. Store it privately, outside company devices if policy allows and without taking confidential material. The point is steadiness, because lonely afternoons make the mind bargain with pain. Chronic exclusion creates memory fog, because the mind keeps trying to soften the pattern into something survivable. Written facts give your nervous system a handrail while you decide what the pattern means. Reclaiming your power starts when you stop treating the clique as the only possible ecosystem. Look for warmth outside the immediate team. The colleague in another department who answers directly, the remote worker who also misses half the home office gossip, the older employee who has survived 3 waves of social fashion and no longer worships the lunch table. Build small, clean connections around work, coffee, walking, shared interests, not desperation. Your brain needs corrective experiences. Neuroplasticity works through repetition, not slogans. Every sane interaction slowly teaches your body that the whole world is not that one single frozen room. Then widen the horizon beyond the company. Quietly update your resume, not because you must flee tomorrow, but because a workplace that lets exclusion contaminate access has already told you something about its immune system. Capture achievements while they are fresh. Save performance notes. Reconnect with people who know your actual work and do not need the clique's permission to remember you clearly. Browse roles before you're desperate. The market gives oxygen even when it cannot rescue you. When your brain believes one group controls your future, you start bending in ways that damage you badly. Here's the part that reframes the title. Sometimes coworkers are literally told not to include you, especially during restructures, investigations, conflicts, or when leadership wants distance around someone they are preparing to move out. More often, nobody gives a formal instruction. The instruction travels through posture. A manager stops asking your opinion, and others smell the lowered protection. A gatekeeper rolls their eyes when your name comes up, and the group learns which direction keeps them safe. Humans are herd animals with laptops. They do not need a memo to recognize who has become risky to stand beside. So your job is to read the organism without letting it eat your self-respect. Do not confuse acceptance with collapse. You can accept that these people may never invite you and still refuse to let them starve you of context. You can stop chasing their approval and still require the information needed to perform. You can feel the hurt because you are human. And 40 hours a week is too much time to pretend humans are furniture while also refusing to build your identity around their little private weather system. That combination is maturity with teeth. Work tomorrow and watch differently. Notice who includes you when nobody gains from it, who withholds what should be shared, who warms up only when authority is nearby, and where your body tightens before your mind has evidence. Then answer from the rewired place rather than the wounded one, with fewer apologies, cleaner questions, and better options. The group may keep its circle while you quietly grow beyond it.